Y'all, I got Alex Sanfilippo here with me today. I can't express how phenomenal this is and how special it is because this is going to be my 50th episode. And we're going to talk about during this show how big of a deal that is. And Alex Sanfilippo is a huge reason why I made it to episode 50, why I stayed in podcasting to begin with. And so I really, really wanted to have him for episode 50 because these milestones, like the 50th episode, the 100th episode, and all of those things like that are very, very special. You can't just have anybody on the show. Like it has to be somebody that means something special and significant. And so that's why I went with him. Alex, how are you?
I'm great. I am just so thankful that you're having me for episode 50. Like I understand as a podcaster myself, like how big of a deal that is. Like you didn't just wake up one day and you're like, I need someone for my 50th episode. Like you've been thinking about it probably since like episode 30 or 40. Like who's going to be that 50th episode? So I am just honored like that you chose me to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, fuck yes. And so Alex created, okay, so his current website is podpros.com. All of this information will go in the show notes. He's on all the social media and everything like that. Podcasting Made Simple is his podcast. I met Alex sometime last year when he sent me an email to my Sex, Drugs, and Jesus account, introducing himself as the creator of an app called PodMatch. PodMatch is like Tinder, but for podcast guests and hosts. Now, usually I get bullshit in my inbox, and I looked at his email and I was like, oh, Lord, here go another one of these motherfuckers trying to waste my time and shit. And I didn't open it at first because I had more pressing matters and shit. Then when I had time, I didn't delete it because I don't like to delete things until I at least purview them. And I looked at it and I was like, this might be a little something here I might be able to work with. And so I messaged him back, and then he had a very handsome photo in his email too. He's a very good looking man, as you all can see. And I was like, okay, he ain't bad looking, and he seems like he has a brain if they're between those good looking ears. So then I responded back to him, yes, there's more to. I need a man that not just look good, y'all. He needs to have some common damn sense and some sort of intelligence and some practical information I can work with, not just good looks. And so he responded back to me personally, not his team of people and everything like that. I can't stand dealing with middlemen. And that comes back from my drug dealing days. But, he actually had useful information. His app is free. I didn't have to pay for it. And I was just starting and everything like that. And so I needed that option. And the rest is history. I ended up signing up for PodMatch, and I'm still on PodMatch today, and I'm still in business. So we're going to talk about PodMatch. Alex has a couple of different companies that he's dealing with that all have to do with podcasting. And we're going to talk about podcast SOP, his podcast lottery, something called PodStyle, and the Pod Pros community in this show. That's what's going to be coming up. So tell us, Alex, what what got you into this whole podcasting business?
Well, first off, I have to just say thank you. I appreciate the fact that the one, you think I'm good looking, and two, that you responded to me. Back when I emailed you, I had just I'll share this real quick, I'll get into it, but I came from a background of corporate. So I did 15 years in corporate America, and if there's one thing that it taught me, it's how to write terrible emails. And thank you for the grace you had with me, because I look back at those emails now, I'm like, "What? Why did I type that up?" Like, it looked like a computer typed it up and, like, just picked the words for me. It was so bad, but I was conditioned after 15 years of writing emails in corporate that I just didn't know how to write a good email. But you had grace with me. You're one of the first people to give me a shot. And I'll say this, Devannon writes the best testimonials for people. Like, maybe it's just people you believe in, like, but art, like, if I'm having a down day, like when people are just being rude and mean to me, I'll go back and, like, I actually have like pictures with your testimonial on it. And I'll go back and read that and be like, you know what? Like, we are doing something good here. Like, forget this person who just wants to cuss me out for no reason, right? Like, they just are being mean. And I'll just remember people like Devannon that have helped me. So anyway, thank you for that. So to jump in, like, I know I already mentioned the corporate thing. So I come from a background in corporate America. I was in the aerospace industry. And I just hit a day where I was like, I think I'm ready to move on. Like, I want to do something else, but I didn't know how to do anything else. So I was like, I don't want a 9 to 5 job anymore, but I don't know how to do anything else. So I started a podcast, to talk to people that had successfully left a 9 to 5 job to become a full-time entrepreneur, to kind of have like that financial time freedom. And because I wanted to learn and I couldn't afford the coaching necessarily. So I was like, it's like free coaching when you have a podcast, as you know, right? Like you get some of the best people, smartest people in the world. You've had that tons of times on your show, haven't you?
You really do though. You learn
Yeah.
you learn so much as a host.
Yeah. You really, I mean, you're like the number one student and all the listeners are the bonus. So, but anyway, so I started a show and just really started learning a lot about entrepreneurship. And while I was doing that, I knew I wanted to start a company of some sort. And I just fell in love with the podcasting space. Like in general, it's a really optimistic space full of like abundance mindset people, which is my tribe, right? Like we can all be kind and all have like a piece of the pie, if you will, right? And I just really respected that about the industry. So I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to jump into this industry. And my show at that time did really well. So I started speaking on podcasting stages and doing some educational stuff. And I just started asking other podcasters what they were struggling with. And I continuously heard, I'm struggling to find the right guest for my show, like the ideal guest for my show. And I just realized, you know what, there's probably a need to connect guests and hosts together. And to keep the story short, I just decided to build something that was really similar to a dating app, but for podcast guests and hosts. Now, granted, I'll say this, I've been married longer than dating apps have been around. So I had no firsthand experience with it. But the one time I decided that's what I wanted to do, I went to a friend's house to hang out with him. And I knew he was like big into the dating apps. Like he was recently single and just had all of them. So I'm like, hey, can I just watch you for the next 30 minutes while we eat, play on your dating apps? And so he started like doing all these things. And then he started getting concerned because I started asking questions. He goes, what's wrong, dude? Like, are you okay? Like you and Alicia good? I'm like, yeah, we're great. I'm like, I think I want to build one of these, but for something else. Anyway, long story short, we were able to develop just that. And it's worked really well to serve the industry.
Alicia is his beautiful wife, and she helps him out. Yeah, she's like, a really big part of, of all that Alex does.
Oh, yeah. She's like the brain behind the operation in many ways. So,
She definitely is. Now, concerning those people who you say was cussing you out and everything, if you ever have that problem again, you let me know. I got people who can take care of them.
yes, I like it.
They won't ever bother you again. Trust me.
You mentioned that. If you don't mind, can I riff on that for a minute? So, so here's the thing. Like, I've trained my team, we're a small team, but I've trained people to remember one thing. Like, I mean, this is the Sex, Drug, and Jesus podcast. I'm going to mention Jesus real quick. And like for me, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, I've always known that my job is to love people that aren't always lovable. And so I've just trained the team to think this way that, hey, hurting people hurt people. So if somebody's hurting us, it's because they're hurting themselves. We might be the only love they get. So we're never going to retaliate in a mean way. I might take up on your offer, but we're always going to respond in a loving way. Like we're not going to go over the top. If someone's just overall rude, like says something terrible, we're just going to ignore it and let it go. But in general, if someone's like just being harsh, rude, we're going to respond in a really loving way, not necessarily to win them over, to make them a customer. At the end of the day, that might be the only nice person they interact with. So for us, we always remember that hurting people hurt people. And our job as a company is to love people. Like first and foremost, we are a human to human business. So we're not like B2B or B2C. We call ourselves human to human. So H to H. And our job is just to be the light for some people in the world, whether they become customers of ours or members of ours or not, right? And then day, that's what's important for us to do. That mentality is not always easy to keep. That's why we actually have on our Slack channel a little channel called Happy News. And people will just go back through and post nice things people have said about us. And your name comes up a lot. So I'm always just thankful to see your name come up. I'm like, that's somebody who actually, like, if I need to jump on a call and I need him to take care of somebody, if I need somebody to take care of this mean guy, right? Like Devannon is my contact. So I'm good to go, but I appreciate you. Thank you.
Hell to the yeah. Or as it is stated in the Hebrew Bible, every time we go to do good, that there's evil present. And so the heart of what you're doing is to help to elevate people. So if we're going to get spiritual about it and look at it even metaphysically, you're driving positive energy, negativity doesn't want to see you prevail. And so people who have been hurt, when you say hurting people hurt people, they are more vulnerable to negativity than people who abide in a more constant state of positivity. And so therefore, negativity wants to attack you. It can do so through people who are catering to their pain rather than to their positivity. And so you're doing the right thing by overcoming that with more positivity. As the Hebrew Bible also says, we overcome that evil with good.
Mm-hmm.
And so So speaking of foolishness, though, this sort of show here that I'm doing is kind of like a step away from the main, my main, my main vein in a way. But I don't care because I wanted to do it because of the significance of of who you are and why the show is here. So I want to talk about the issues that I had when I started podcasting and everything like that. And that's going to get down into more of the dark side, the taboo side of things, which is the main vein of the show. So this isn't really like a businessy podcast. We're still going to talk some shit, y'all.
Please, I hope so. By the way, this is the first time in like probably almost a year that I've come on a podcast that's not specifically about podcasting. So I am down for anything, which I know your show is all about. So I am here to get into whatever we want to, but honored to go whatever direction you want. But thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. I would like when I messaged you, I was like, oh my God, I hope he wants to come on my show. I know this is really, really wild and not conservative and everything. So I was writing my book, Sex, Drugs, and Jesus, my memoir, and then someone told me, hey, it's a good idea to start a podcast, to have basically a cross promotion thing and already build an audience and everything. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. The same person also went about the business of introducing me to their podcasting team that was helping them. And so I hired them and everything for a ridiculous amount of money. When I met you, I think I was paying about like 1,500 a month. Okay, so they were charging me like say $150 or $200 per person just to have someone come on my show. Now these were just recycled people that this other guy who I already knew, who had already been on his show. So all they were doing was sending an email and saying, "Hey, will you come on this new podcast that we are starting or we have something to do with?" So that's what's called hustling. This is the danger of dealing with middlemen and stuff like that because they're going to charge you a lot of money and stuff like that. And so now I'm paying $150 a week for show notes, and things like that. And so basically 450 to $600 per episode just to get it created. And this is a large reason why people don't either get into podcasting or stay in it because it looks more expensive than it has to be. I fell into this same trap myself. So I had paused the creation of it because I was like, this is incredibly expensive. I don't really like the energy of dealing with these people. I feel like I'm being used and hustled and taken advantage of.
Hmm.
There's got to be a simpler way. I didn't know what way. When I searched Google and everything like that, I would find these companies doing similar things as them. Hey, come pay us this exorbitant amount of money and we're going to get you on these big shows and everything like that. No guarantees on if it's going to benefit you or not, but it was that same thing. And then you messaged me and I was like, okay, I can do it for free, or it's like $39 a month if you want the upgraded version of PodMatch, which I went with because that's a hell of $39 a month is a lot cheaper than 1,500.
It's good math right there.
So, right. And so I want you to speak to me, Alex, about some of the bullshit that people have come to you crying, groveling and crying just like I did, licking their wounds, saying, "Please help me. I don't want to quit podcasting. What help me?" What sort of shit have you seen people been going through?
All kinds of things. I mean, that's a perfect example of something that's very common. And what happens, I just call the people that are those hustlers, whatever you want to call them. They're like the gurus of the industry. And maybe guru shouldn't be a bad word, but my head, if someone tells me they're podcasting guru, I'm going to be like, that's a red flag. Like, what does that mean? Like, why are you a guru? And like, what are you teaching other people to do? It's so common. And it all starts from taking advantage of somebody who has a passion, an interest, something they're trying to do. Like, your show is extremely purposeful. I mean, Sex, Drugs, and Jesus is like a purpose-driven show. Like, you have a plan for it, you know where it's going. Maybe it started as a hobby, and maybe it still is a hobby, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it's something that actually adds value to people's lives, and you have a specific focus on it. And those are the people that get taken advantage of because somebody knows, you know what, this person's passionate. They want to do this. They're willing to invest. I'm going to charge them way too much. And I don't like to ever talk bad about anybody, but it doesn't have to be that way in podcasting. It's just people taking advantage of somebody who wants to explore that passion. And that it's something that's very common. If you use Google to this day, you're still most likely going to find those type of people. But there are alternatives. Thankfully, there are other ways around it. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg to do it. At the end of the day, maybe if you're in a place financially where it makes sense and you just don't want to touch anything, right? You want to wash your hands of it, say, I'm going to record and I'm not going to touch anything else ever. you could go for it. That would be fine. If it keeps the main thing, I'm all for it. But at the end of the day, most of us are not in that. I'm not in that boat. Most people aren't, right? It just doesn't make sense. So, I mean, I've seen all kinds of things like this happen, and people fall into the trap of this is the only route. So I think the first thing I really want to get in people's heads that are listening is that if you have a passion or something you want to do with a podcast, you do not have to go that route of spending a ton of money. There are alternatives, and you can work your way up to things if you're saying eventually I want to outsource this or do that. But you can start everything on your own with just, I don't know the exact dollar amount, but probably less than $50 a month. You could be doing really well at that dollar amount.
Right. Now, and I stayed with podcasting because I started it because of the reasons that they told me, like, hey, this could be a good complement to being an author. But I stayed with it because in the process of doing it, I realized that this is basically every show is like a message preached.
Mhm.
Every show is a testimony, if you will. But this is better than just standing up and testifying on a Sunday morning in church. Hallelujah. Or preaching a message because it's recorded and this will outlive me. So even if somebody stops a podcast, those shows remain, out there and they can always be accessed until the end of time. And so after having gone through everything I went through, being homeless and, getting HIV and everything like that, living on the streets and being a drug dealer, and I started kind of tiptoeing in and out of churches again, it never really felt right or came to me to like stand up and speak about the deliverance that God had given me. The words never came. I considered maybe was there something wrong with me or something like that, but it just wasn't God's preferred platform for me. I think podcasting was because I get to tell it again and again and again from different angles all the time, and then people can access it at their leisure, which is better than just speaking to one congregation. And so I want to remind people though that when you have the money to spend on things and stuff like that, and these people are trying to corral you, that you, the investor, you have the upper hand always. It is very, very interesting how when those of us who have some expendable income to spend on something are spending it, but the team, the assistants or whatever are trying to, it's almost like they have a way of seizing this control over us, even though we're the ones with the money. So have you ever seen that sort of mind fuck before?
Yeah, before I answer that, I got to go back to something because you're talking about this show being like it's an extension of you. This is how you can leave a legacy. I'm about halfway through episode 39 with Branch, and he talked about guilt, condemnation, and like being so hard on yourself, like and how to stop doing that. It's easily one of the most profound, powerful podcast episodes I've ever heard, and I'm not even finished with it yet. I encourage everybody who's hearing this, it has not listened to episode number 39 of Sex, Drugs, and Jesus, go back and listen to that episode. It is, again, profound. So what you're doing here is going to leave a legacy. Like I believe people will be listening to that episode alone for forever, right? Like that's going to be something that can always go back and really help people a lot. And going back into what you're talking about now, like, yeah, even if you have the money, like you're saying, it's good wisdom. You do have control. When I got started, I didn't necessarily have a lot of money, but I thought that I had to use, I started off with somebody to edit. Everything I read was that editing is almost impossible, which isn't the case. But everyone thing was like, hey, you're not going to be able to edit yourself. It's going to be too much. And I went with the most recommended one I could find. They were charging me like just shy of $200 per episode. I didn't have that money back then. And I felt like I was trapped because they're like, hey, you need to buy this in sets of 10 because you're going to save X amount instead of just buying one at a time. And then the next time they're like, hey, you should buy 30 because your show's doing well. You need to keep it going. And I felt like I was like, okay, this is a money pit, but I know it's helping people, but I'm not making any money yet. Like, what do I do? Do I just outpace it until eventually I can pay for it? Like, what do I have to do here? And that was the first time I started talking to other podcasters. And this was early in my journey. This is like around the time of the launch of my show. And when I started talking to other podcasters, I felt empowered because there are people like, oh, well, no, you could do it yourself. Here, I'll teach you. Like, let's do like a quick Zoom and I'll show you like how I edit really fast. And it wasn't until I got around the community of people that I started feeling like I could get freedom from the people trying to charge me a lot of money to do podcasting. And again, if you do have the money and you just say, I don't want to touch it, fine, you can. But at the end of the day, I think there's something to be said for someone who learns how it works anyway. For me, like I don't do all of podcasting anymore. Like I'm not the only guy on my team. There's multiple people now that I've actually hired that I'm getting a good deal on, but I know how every piece of the puzzle works. So when one of them says I'm struggling to keep up, I'm not like, wow, you loser. I can't believe you're not keeping up. Like, what's wrong with you? I'm not saying that because I can go back and be like, you know what? I remember how much work that was. So I can say, how can I support that? Do you want me to come in and help edit a little bit more? Do we need another team member? Like, what do we need to do to improve that? So I think there's something to be said for us sitting back, taking a little bit extra time and learning all the elements of podcasting just like anything else in life, when you know it all, you don't necessarily need to do it, but you have at least empathy towards someone else who might be doing something that you previously didn't understand.
Mhm. You better preach it on a Tuesday afternoon. And so, like, for sex, drugs, and Jesus, I use my MacBook, which I tried doing this on, like, on a Windows computer. Don't. You need to get a MacBook. And once you go Mac, it's true. I was reluctant. Oh my God. This thing is like an electrical orgasm. Everything is perfect about this fucking thing. Fuck PC. You need an Mac, baby, honey. And
They
that
better be paying you. That's all I'm going to say. They better be paying you.
they will one day, damn it. They will.
I believe it. I believe it.
And so that's it. Just that. I use an app called Transistor to distribute it. So if you're wondering how do you get your show on all of these 50 million, or really, literally about 20 different podcasting platforms, it's just put on one place and it's distributed automatically. It's really just that simple. And then Alex told me about the script, which is how I learned how to edit it myself, edit each show myself rather than paying, I think it was $200 per show for editing. I think the script might be like $10 a month. I do the annual thing. And I think Transistor might be like 10 or 20 a month. So like you said, it's true. You need less than $50 to have all the things to do a show. You get yourself a good mic, a good camera, or you could store it with just the MacBook mic and camera is not necessarily the best, but it's better than nothing. And I don't want people to get obsessed with feeling like you have to have the top of the line everything and all these sound mixing boards. I know people who feel the need to do that. Like when they start, they go, okay, let me go on Amazon or somewhere and get this whole podcast production kit and everything like that. I know so many people who do that. What do you have to say about like starting equipment?
Start with what you have. You're talking about a Mac. If you have like a brand new MacBook, the built-in camera and mic is actually pretty good. Like, no one's ever gonna be like, "Oh, what's that terrible sound?" Now, don't like use your cell phone. Like don't even an iPhone isn't gonna be near as good as the actual MacBook. Like, start with what you have. And here's like I'll dive into this a little bit more, but here's what I'll say overall about this. People will forgive you for the quality of like the sound and the production. They won't forgive you for the lack of quality of content. So again, the sound and all the production doesn't have to be the best, but if the content itself isn't good, no one can forgive you. Now, what I mean by that is you could have the most expensive mic on the planet. You could spend 50 grand on your setup. If what you're saying isn't good, no one cares about the other side of it, right? So at the end of the day, you need to try, like put in a little bit of effort, of course, like do your best to soundproof a little bit or whatever you do, but don't go over the top with it. Focus on having really good content, and over time, things can improve. I've got a Shure MV7. I'm not great with the tech stuff. MV7 is what it's called. I think I paid $220 for this mic, and this is like my forever mic. I'll use this one for as long as I podcast. Before this, I had a mic that was about $80. Wasn't great, but here's the thing: it got me through my first like 80 or 90 episodes, no problem, and it was great. It worked really good. So at the end of the day, really focus again on the quality of the content and don't go over the top on the production. I think that a lot of us, Devanin, we get nervous about the idea of starting a show, so we just fully engrave ourselves in all the things, right? Like, oh, I need to like learn the best sound. I need to buy this mic. I need to test out a few of these. What I challenge you to do is just press the record button and get started. I'll tell you who really spoke this to me in a big way was actually Seth Godin. He and I had a conversation at one point, and he's like a marketing like genius. The guy's brilliant. And he told me, he's like, hey, Alex, all right, let's imagine that you're a lifeguard. You're brand new. It's your first day on the job. You're out there by the water and you see somebody out in the ocean who's drowning. Now, because you're new and not experienced, you see that person drowning, is your reaction to go find a really experienced lifeguard and say, hold on, I know someone would be really good at saving this person. Let me go run back to the lifeguard station and find them. Or are you just going to jump in the water, not think about it, as sloppy as it is, do your best to save that person? Every single time, everybody who is in that scenario is going to jump in the water and do their best to save that person, no matter how pretty or ugly it ends up looking. That's just our instinct. And I think that with content creation, we have to remember that what we're doing is serving the world, but it doesn't serve the world if you don't hit the record button. Again, you might not have all the best gear. You might not have everything that you feel that you need to be super successful with it. But at the end of the day, when you don't hit publish, when you don't hit record, it's not serving anybody. So start off by serving people and then focus on continuous improvement over time. And eventually you might sound really good and get really great at it. But today, do your best to serve people where you're at. That's my little rant right there.
Rant on. And so, then just like with all things, we get better over time. You don't start anything as an expert or as a fully proficient. That would rob us of the fulfillment that comes when we grow. If we're just perfect at everything from day one, it doesn't work like that. And yeah, I dissed on the PC, but like Alex was saying, we had to start somewhere. Look, you can do it if you have a PC, but just with mines, the bitch was slow and it took like 50 minutes to do it. Shit on my MacBook, it takes like 2 minutes. So it just really pressured me to create it more stress. But if you have a PC, then baby, you start with the PC just like I did. And when you can afford to upgrade to the Mac, or you can get you an Apple card, and then you can just finance the shit interest free on your Apple card. And in terms of like the sound quality, and yeah, I'm on like my third mic too. I think we
Yeah.
all do that.
Yep.
Got fucking mics falling out the closet, from when we upgrade and shit. So the script that app that you recommended to me, they have two features on there that will really take away most of your worries, or really all of your worries when it comes to how you're gonna sound. There's a button that you can click to enhance your recordings. And so it'll take your voice and pull it forward, like the voice of yours and your guests, and really clean it up. It eliminates background noises like the damn dogs that get out when you just knew you had them put up and shit like that. And in my case, the birds and the pigeons and shit that fly by the window because I live next to a nature oasis basically in my backyard. And then there's another button on there you can click that'll get rid of filler words. And by filler words, I mean like oohs and ums and stuff like that, which annoys some people. Doesn't really bother me, but just with one flip of the switch, you can just get rid of them all. So the shit is not complicated to do. We record these meetings in Zoom. Some people use other apps. I like Zoom. They're simple. They've been around a long time. They're quick, concise, and to the point. And then once you press the record button, once it's over, it will convert it to an MP3, MP4, whatever the damn audio file is. And then that's what you put into Descript. And then Descript will transcribe it. It'll create a transcript for you, which you can in turn use for your show notes and for your search engine optimization and all of that later on. So it's a bit of a learning curve. It's not as hard as you might think, but it was worth me learning to save $400 or $500 a month to do. So don't let people hustle you, try to act like this shit is complicated, because they're using these same damn programs that we're telling you right now and charging you an arm and a dick for it, and then try to act like they're doing something special. No, boo, they doing the same damn thing.
One more piece of advice I like to give to people is if you're listening to this show, like you're hearing, you've been with sex, drugs, and Jesus for a long time, right? And Devannon speaking like your language, like I want to start a podcast. Email Devannon and say, I've got $100 with your name on it if you'll just give me 30 minutes of your time. Because that would be so valuable. I think that if someone spent 30 minutes with you, now knowing what you know about podcasting, you could probably save them thousands of dollars just by the little bit of knowledge that you're sharing here, but going a little bit more in depth, showing somebody how to record for 30 minutes. I bet spending that $100 would, again, save somebody hundreds of hours and probably thousands of dollars. I mean, you'd probably agree, right? If day one you're getting ready to start, if someone could have been like, hey, hold on, let me show you this, that would have saved you a lot. I'm imagining, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, I have a personal guide to go, here's Transistor, here's the script, and everything like that. I mean, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And and it is said as the Hebrew Bible, my people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Mm.
We literally destroy ourselves for not doing research. So it's a good thing to be passionate, but then the Hebrew Bible also tells us that zeal without knowledge is destructive too. Or it's not good. I don't know if it uses
Yeah.
the term destructive, but it's not good to have zeal without knowledge. Just basically, I want to get up and go do shit, but I don't want to take time to study about what the fuck I want to go do.
Sometimes that's the problem with the world, isn't it?
And so, oh, I hear a Republican echo in what you just said, and
Oh no.
I
I like to sit in the middle and stay out of politics. So I hope I didn't sound too much like that.
oh, that's just me because of the things going on inside of me and how I feel about them. So whenever somebody says something about like people who are extreme for seemingly no logical reason at all, they're the first things that come to my mind because Alice is not political. I became political a couple of years ago. So I always say fuck Republicans. And I always say I wish Democrats would grow a pair of balls and do more with the power that they have.
So
And
it sounds like you're right in the middle with me then. Like it sounds exactly like where I sit.
Oh, well, if that's the middle, well, then there's just Malcolm in the Middle, this shit. That's an old show, y'all. You mentioned earlier about people like being passionate about starting their podcast. You made the analogy of the lifeguard and everything. And so y'all, when you're thinking about starting a podcast, let's not get caught up in what seems like the glitz and the glam of it all. Hey, I've got a show. It looks like people are making a whole lot of money. You're going to be the next fucking, I guess if you would want to be someone like Joe Rogan or, whoever hell is on Sirius or whatever the case may be, making bajillions of dollars and everything like that. Okay. So the way you got to go about this is like you got to pray about it, meditate, whatever deity you worship, or if you don't do any of that, get in your head why you want to do it for reasons other than fame. And then if one day you happen to reach the level of, Howard Shore, or someone like huge, 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 all the better. But if that doesn't happen, then you're totally happy and satisfied anyway. So why? And this is a big thing with you, Alex. You always challenge, people, why? What's the why? What's the why? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? I always say, I need to know why I feel the way I feel, why I believe what I believe, why am I doing what I'm doing. So if you're going to start a podcast, and there's all kinds of podcasts from people talking about gossip, the clothes, the shoes, the titties, the sex, to music, to business, so much business. There's a good variety, but why do you want to do it? And what unique thing do you have to say? Are you just trying to, and look, and there's nothing wrong with looking into it. Some stuff we start and we don't finish it, and there's no shame in that because we're all on a journey. So, anything more you would care to say about purpose?
Yeah, I think that this is like you said, this is where I always tell people to start because what I find is people burn out too quick because they didn't sit back and think about their why. And like you're saying, people go to the wanderies of the world, like that's one of the big networks, the NPRs, the Serial, the Joe Rogans, right? Like these big names in podcasting and say, I want to do that. But you and I know this, like no one ever got famous because they wanted to be famous, right? Like there has to be something that you do. And it wasn't usually, most of the time, I'd say, it wasn't their initial intent. They started something because they cared. They had a why behind why they were doing it in the first place. And I find that when people start instead with saying, I'm going to get rich, I'm going to get famous, I'm going to quit my job. When that doesn't happen, they quit really fast. Like they just stop way too soon. But if instead you say, you know what, I really care about, there's always dogs walking by my window. I don't know why, but I have like a busy street and there's like people with their dogs walking all the time. I care about dog walking. So I'm use that as an example, right? And how to help your dog be more appropriate when you're walking them. So they don't go after every squirrel and bark at every other dog, right? Like if you're passionate about that and you had like a real why behind that matter to you about how like you used to be embarrassed about taking your dog out for a walk because it was so misbehaved, right? Like if you had that why behind it and that's why you decided to do this, you might do really well in that niche. But you've got to sit down and decide, okay, why am I going to do this? I want to help educate other people that they don't have to be embarrassed about their dog, right? And I don't have a dog, so this is probably a terrible example, but you get the idea. I'm saying you pick that little focus and say, this is who I'm going to speak to. I'm doing it because I care, because I want to help someone else not struggle the way that I did. When you start with that, it makes it a lot easier for you to keep on going when things get tough. Because Devin, you're talking about like doing the editing and stuff like that. And yeah, we found some, like you have found a really simple way to do this. And your show sounds really good. So anyone could duplicate that, right? Like you could teach someone to do that. And like I said, probably 30 minutes, someone would be set up to win in podcasting. But at the end of the day, you still have to sit and do the work at some point. When those times get tough and you have that strong why, you can say, you know what? I'm doing this for my neighbor. They really need to hear this episode. I've got to get this out. But if you're saying, I'm not getting any richer, I'm not getting any more famous, why am I even wasting my time? You're going to stop too soon. And now the flip side is something that you mentioned as well, which is some people, they just are trying it out. Their friend does it and they're like, oh, I'm going to try doing a podcast. There is no harm in that. If you do 3 episodes and decide it's your least favorite thing on the planet, at least you can say you tried it. So you don't need to go through all this unless you feel that there's a real reason for it. If you're just exploring a passion or a potential passion or a hobby, go for it. There's no reason to stay in it if it's just not right for you. Don't feel like you have to. There's plenty of other mediums. But if you are getting into this for a specific reason and you know that there is some power behind it, start with that why, really determine it, sit down. I even talk about writing it out. Write it out, think about who's going to be listening, and then start going for it from there.
Child, see, that's why I had to have you on my show. You have a clear mind. You're just teeming and overflowing with passion and all the things that makes people want to get up and do shit. You're like a natural born leader. like Barack Obama, I mean, the main reason why white people, not all white people, but like a lot of them, a lot of Republicans really hate him is because he has that essence, that flair, that thing you can't go to school for.
Oh
Nothing
yeah.
wrong with going to leadership schools and all of that. People got their different ways, but some people are just born with that thing that makes people want to get behind them, and their delivery when they're talking and speaking is as though they've done it ever since eternity was spawned into motion. And you have that same spirit about you.
Thank you. That totally just made my day. I could go ahead and we could hang up now and I'm good to go. Actually, I always say this. When Obama was leaving office after his second term, I always so President Obama was like on his way out. I always say, no matter who's president for the rest of my life, they're never going to be that polished. Like, there's just no way. Like, we're all going to have to get used to a lower standard of like just the ability to speak because everyone else talks. And I'm like, what are they trying to say? Like, spit it out, man. Like, but so yeah, I mean, President Obama set a standard from that regard. And I appreciate you even putting me in that category. You, like I said, just made my day. Thank you for that.
Hell to the, only speaks the truth.
I know it. Actually, that's one thing I have to say this. I actually reminded myself. I put it down on a piece of paper because earlier. So for me, being a Christian, like I don't mean to over spiritualize things, but I prayed about this interview today, knowing it was coming up. Prayed for you as well, and I felt like God reminded me of like your genius, if you will. You've got a sense of boldness and realness that is just so rare in the world, and I believe that that's why you're going to succeed so much in the world. Like you're already succeeding, but I just believe that it's just going to continue to multiply and God's going to bless the fact that you're, again, bold and you're real. Those just aren't things anymore. Like in today's world, unfortunately, not like it used to be at least. And you have that rare gift. And I just really respect that from you, Devin. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. I had to say it sometime during this interview.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. I want you to remind me though, because I seem to remember in my research of you, like in the beginnings of PodMatch, maybe you were doing yard work or something like that, and you had like an epiphany or like something, some sort of knowledge came to you, it's like you went back inside and you started writing.
Oh yeah.
Or-
I definitely wasn't doing yard work. I live in a condo because I hate yard work so much. So,
What were you,
um,
you were doing something else and you stopped it.
yeah, I was actually working out. So it was right at the beginning of COVID, and I was doing like a kettlebell workout because I only had a few things at home at that point. Like I had to buy equipment, but I had like a kettlebell. So I was like swinging a kettlebell, like thinking about this idea, and literally, I can't even explain it, Devanin. Like it just like it hit me at one. Not the weight, but I mean like the idea hit me. I put down the weight. I ran inside to some whiteboards, and I have 3 whiteboards behind like where I'm at right now, behind like this screen here. And I just mapped the whole thing out. Like it just hit me in a moment. Can't really explain it. It just came out of nowhere. Like again, when I'm working out, I'm not usually thinking about business, but it really hit me in that moment.
And you're talking about PodMatch specific.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, PodMatch specifically, because I came back from a conference I spoke at right before the world shut down. Like a week before the world shut down, I went to a 2,000 person conference. It was the first week of March 2020. And that's where people continuously were telling me I'm having trouble finding guests for my show. And it was interesting at that same conference, there's people there that were like, hey, I just released this book. Do you know any podcasts about this I could talk to? And I was actually saying, oh, I just talked to that person. Come over here. Let me introduce you real quick. So I was making those connections there. And I'm not always the smartest guy in the world. I came home not knowing what to do with that idea. And then when I was working out is when that came forth. So yeah, the idea for PodMatch came from during that workout is when it just really was like, this is what I've got to do. And it came like a moment.
You know, that that was a moment of divinity. And this is the sort of thing that comes to people who call upon the Lord, who call upon powers greater than a power greater than themselves, because there's been several times in my life in the Hebrew Bible, and I always refer to the Bible as the Hebrew Bible because I always like to pay tribute and homage to the Middle East from where the Bible really comes from.
And but my mom is Hebrew. So I appreciate that.
Do you speak the language?
No, I take fully after my dad, who's Italian. Sorry.
Hebrew and Italian ain't a bad mix though, bro.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm happy.
Pretty good. The Hebrew Bible speaks to us about a still small voice. There was a prophet and something was going on. And it was like, there was a fire and a wind, but God wasn't in the fire or in the wind. But then, here comes a still small voice. When gosh, I have so many examples. let me see, what's a good one? An epiphany like that came when I was trying to get the name for my massage business. I was at a wine party and I didn't know what to name it. A friend looked up like in a moment. It's like it just hit her from nowhere. And she was like, you need to find something that has to do with your third eye. And then that's how I found the Swahili word for vision, which means my ono. And my massage business was my ono massage and wellness. When I was coming off of being homeless and I was a janitor, I had walked off of the janitor job because it pissed me off. And I was trying to figure out what to do. I was sitting still somewhere and it came to me to look up food delivery jobs. And I had like 3 felonies. I still have those felonies on my record and I couldn't get a job anywhere. And I thought about that and I ended up being able to get hired that way. It's in like these quiet moments. And a workout is a quiet time of meditation, is in a form of active meditation to me.
Yes.
I feel like the Lord can speak to us because our minds are not as busy as they usually are. And so the Lord can slip an idea into our conscious, and then we can immediately go and do something about it. So I was very intrigued when I read that wherever it is that I saw that ad, and I was like, it looks like the Spirit spoke to Alex in this moment, and then energized his soul to immediately go and do it. Because when God puts something in you, He also gives you the energy to go about the business of getting it done. And then when other people are looking at you thinking, well, how is he doing that? And how is he keeping it all together? It looks exhausting because it's not their calling. It's yours. And so this work that you're doing is not just a natural work, but it's a spiritual work. And you see, not all forms of ministry have to do with preaching from a pulpit or have to do with a church. When I was going to go be a recruiter in the Air Force, my spiritual leader, Evangelist Nelson, who was a prophetess in her own, and a highly clairvoyant woman, a true prophetess. It's very hard to find people like that anymore. And she was like, that's ministry that you're going to go do. And I was like, recruiting, what does that have to do with ministry and everything like that? But anything that you're doing to enhance somebody's livelihood is true religion. That is mission work. That is outreach. And it can come in any kind of form. I don't give a shit if it's a TikTok channel, so you don't have to go to church to do the Lord's work. And so I just wanted to really drive home the divinity that surrounds the brands that you've created and how divine the nature is of what you're doing at its core.
Yeah, thank you for that. You talk about this like that still small voice. That's always been so true for me. And whenever someone in my life who I know who happens to also be a believer in Jesus, I'm like, oh, I keep on asking God about this. He's just not answering. I always say, have you taken any time to listen? And the answer is always, no, not really. I'm like, well, if it's a still small voice and you're just, God help, God, 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 like you're not really given any time to hear anything. And in my life, that was not a normal moment for me to have, like, cause yes, like you're saying, like for me, I wasn't like listening to loud music. I usually don't listen to music while I work out. So it was quiet. So it is like somewhat therapeutic, but I didn't expect God to speak to me in that moment. I think he just needed my attention. And you're right. And since then, I've learned to make intentional time just to sit down and be quiet. Some people call it meditation. It's just like you're not letting your mind actively just run, just sitting down and like being present in that moment, being still. And any other idea I've had has come in those moments. Like, and people who maybe aren't spiritual at all, right? Aren't into that stuff. This might sound totally crazy, but I can not really take full credit for any of my ideas. Now, execution, I can, because at the end of the day, an idea, no matter where it comes from, doesn't really matter if you don't do anything with it. So I've always been able to perform and execute at a high level, but I really give God the credit for the ideas that I've had, and that is my ministry. Like the churches here where I live, they all shut down when COVID happened. There was a year and a half where that wasn't even an option anymore. And so this just became my ministry. I was used to serving at church. Like I was used to greeting at the door, taking up the trash. Like those are things I love to help do, or park cars, whatever it is. But then it just became, you know what? This is my ministry. This is what I have. And I feel like God spoke it to me, and I just have done my best to steward it really well. And I'm glad that you brought it up that way. I've never gotten to share it quite like that before.
Hallelujah, tabernacle and praise. It's it's a good thing to always take the time to invite God into whatever it is that you're doing and to get quiet and listen. And just because you don't feel like you hear anything, and when we're talking about God speaking, y'all, we're not necessarily talking about an audible voice, although it's not like he can't do that. It's like you just kind of know. And you also understand that it comes with a zest of energy and inspiration that is apart from how you usually are. And so when we say God is speaking or something like that, that's really generally what we mean. And so you created PodMatch to bridge people, hosts, and guests. How many people are on PodMatch now?
There at time of recording this, there's about 27,000 people using it.
27,000 people. So, and then we said that the average, to speak to us about the averages of about how many episodes someone records before they quits, the average in the industry.
Yeah, so, people who quit, unfortunately, it's called pod fade. It's, like, been used forever. You've heard pod fade. It's 7 episodes is, like, the magic number that people are just like, "I'm done. Forget this." Like, that's where that people just, tend to stop. But I decided to look past that. So let's imagine you get past the 7 episodes. Where do people stop? The amount of people that make it to 1 year after passing the 7-year mark. So I think it's something like 90% or 95% of people stop at 7 episodes. So the 5% that keep on going, 90% of them stop before the end of 1 year. So, granted, 1 episode per week, let's just say 50 a year. Like, only a very small fraction are making it to that. Like, I don't know the exact number because I haven't been able to drill down to the data that much because it's hard to really get access to. But it's almost nobody makes it to 50 episodes. Like, that is an extremely rare thing, and it's a huge achievement because it basically means if you're doing 1 episode a year or a day or a week, after 1 year, you've got about 50, 52 episodes, right? And so, yeah, that's where people are really stopping. It goes back to everything we said. They don't have a strong why. Maybe they just wanted to test it, and that's fine. Or they spent all their money trying to get those first few episodes produced, and now they're out of money because they thought they had to go spend it all. Those are some of the most. Those are the main reasons. Those really are. That's why people stop at that really low number.
So I want to dig deeper into PodMatch. So PodMatch it's a very organized website. Another issue that I had when I had my team of assistants or whatever, my production team fucking
Air
everything
quotes.
up.
Air
Air
quotes.
quotes all the way, fucking everything up and creating stress for my life where they didn't need to be. So if they book this person, now they gotta if I want to ask this person something, I have to let the assistant know. Then they've got to email them. Then I've got to wait for them to email me back. I got to request pictures to use for promotions. I got to request their bio. Then I got to talk about whether or not they're going to send me their book. Anything they might want to talk about. It could take like weeks. PodMatch was what Alex has done is combined everything into an electronic media kit on your profile page. So we're like on a dating app. If you're going to say that you're 5'2", green eyes, brunette hair, 10-inch dick, triple Z boobs, whatever the fuck you want to say, you like long walks and kayaking and doing the bioluminescence and shit and all of that. We're going to have on there your biography about you, your already approved photos, your call to action, your links, your social media. Everything is all on one fucking page. 10, if you're a guest, then 10 questions you're ready to answer. So that way, when you're evaluating somebody, these 50 questions that you were going to ask them is already there before you. This is saving you time, energy, and effort. It's is one of the greatest things I appreciate about it because I'm like, this entire media kit is right here. Like, it's already done. And there are other websites out there that are trying to do what PodMatch is doing, but they're failing miserably because I've been on some of those. Y'all acquired, who were those people? Podbean, not
Uh,
Podbean,
Pod it.
Pod,
Pod it.
Pod it. You acquired, then you gobbled them up. And hopefully you get to gobble more because as I meet people say, like sometimes when I have a standing profile on matchmaker.fm. I don't actively use it. I just leave it there. And if somebody messages me, then great. And then I tell them about PodMatch and they never heard of it. Then they go sign up on PodMatch. And so
Uh, I love you.
I'm all like, you need to do better than Matchmaker because Matchmaker, there's other websites out there. Not all, I haven't seen any of the others, but I'm like, I haven't found one that's as easy to use as PodMatch. They have everything there. Then Alex has like systems there to encourage you to do things. There's like a rating system. So you can make it in like the top 10. And then there's your affiliate program where bitches can get paid too. So tell us about these intricacies.
Yeah, I mean, go back to the media kit. That was like really early on that we decided to do that because of the same problem. That's what your listeners So everyone listening to Sex, Drugs, and Jesus right now, you don't care how long it took Devanin to get me booked, or how long it took him to, like how long it took to find a picture, like all these things, right? You don't, that doesn't matter, like the back and forth of that. What matters is the content getting out there. And so in my mind, I was like, hey, we need to get all this on PodMatch so people can just make it really simple. So it's like, okay, yeah, I want this guy as a guest, or I want this lady as a guest. Like, I want this person to be on my show. Cool. Here's their images. Here's their bio. Here's some questions already answered in case we get stuck. All these things. Like the idea was just to have a one-stop shop to make the whole process seamless. You can book straight through the platform. So if you want to basically schedule the interview, you can use our built-in messaging platform. You don't ever have to exchange an email unless you want to. And some people like to, and that's great. That's fine. I actually prefer people to actually build a relationship as well. But if you don't want to, you don't have to do any of that. And yeah, so we built this thing in just basically to say this is a one-stop shop for finding your guest or being a guest. That's the idea. And everything you need is right here in the platform. And then for me personally, going back to just like the purpose side of things, I love this industry and I want to help creators be able to make some extra money, because I get it. Like even if you're spending $50 a month, that's a lot of money to some people. That's like eating for a day for some people. Like they might not have that. So if they're saying, I'm going to start this, I want a way that they can make that back. So we really did the affiliate program. We have something we're calling Pod Value Initiative, which basically means if you're completing interviews using our platform, we're going to give you a piece of it. Like we actually split our revenue in half. So 50% of our revenue we're giving back to creators that are using the platform. And it just kind of, there's a whole mathematical equation I'm not going to get into, but basically the point is we just want to say, hey, you know what, creator, so the podcast host side of things, here is a little cut of what we're making. Just our way of saying thanks and stay in the industry, keep it up. Because at the end of the day, that 10% of people that make it past their first year, I would love to help make that 11% of people making it. Like that would be a dream for me to just help increase it by 1%. Now that might be a really ambitious goal or not ambitious enough, but right now that's my focus. And I know if we could put a little bit of money in people's pockets, make the whole process more seamless, then maybe, just maybe we'd be able to do that. And that's really my big focus, is to help those creators, because ultimately when they share an episode, that's what serves the world. This episode going out is what helps people, not all the administration that went behind it.
Mm-hmm. And keeping in this same spirit, the Pod Pros community is a big deal. And so, and this is one thing that I really appreciate and got so much out of, especially at the beginning. So as a podcaster, and especially during these times when we're like still kind of reeling with this pandemic, the feeling of isolation can be quite poignant, and you can feel alone, especially if you live in a very rural area, or you just don't really fuck with a lot of people. And you may have something you want to say through a podcast, and you can feel very isolated. So Alex has the podcast, like this whole community, which is like a branch of PodMatch. And so you can go on there. Alex has all these like classes and lessons. There's these Zoom meetings that we do where you can get more information, and you can post questions to the whole PodMatch community and ask them about things that you're going through, that you have questions about, and people will respond. There's no charge to be a part of the podcast, this community. And and then Alex is active on there himself. He responds to everything I post.
Well, you're one of my favorites, so maybe not everybody else, but at least Devanin's getting a response from me. So
I'll take that. Is there anything you'd like to say about the community?
yeah, all of my success has been built on community. Anything I've ever done to be successful has been built with a tribe, not me alone. I think of Helen Keller. She had a quote that says, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And I've just built everything I've ever done that way, somehow, some way, having a community element of it. And that's why when I talk about Pod Pros, PodMatch, Podcast, any of the things that I do, right? I never talk about customers, clients, anything like that. I talk about members, because I believe we're all in a community together, and everyone deserves to be maybe a little bit more than just a consumer, right? Or like one of my clients. No, we're all members. We're in this together. And honestly, without each and every one of us, this thing wouldn't work. I've not done paid ads or anything like that. It's because people like Devanin say, you know what, this is a great program. You should use this too. And that's because we're a member of the same community or family, as I like to even call it. And that's what's really helped. So for me, it's always gonna be full of free resources, free stuff, and just, hey, let's talk about what we're struggling with together. Because like you said, being a creator, not just in podcasting, in general, like if you're a YouTube channel person, like a blogger, anything, like being a creator is a fairly lonely space, especially in today's world that we're in now, like a post-ish pandemic world, right? It's lonely. Like we're all virtual and you don't get a lot of immediate feedback. So having that community or tribe, I find helps us all to go a lot further, a lot faster.
right. There's too much danger in feeling alone. When we talk about that, then my mind goes like in my LGBTQIA plus community, how, and then also being a military veteran, how we get alone in our minds and it results in so much suicide and so much other hurting and stuff like that. Just the deception of isolation leads to so much pain and loss. And there's no reason to not fulfill your dream of reaching the world through media just because you don't feel like you have someone to lean on. Alex has solved that problem for you. So, before we run out of time here, just give us a quick rundown on what podcast SOP is, your podcast lottery, and the pod style.
Sure, yeah. PodStyle is like literally just I just call it gear for podcasters. It's like shirts and stuff like that. People started asking for like PodMatch shirts specifically when we launched. I'm like, let's just do like a drop ship thing on Shopify. I always get Spotify and Shopify mixed up. On Shopify, the one with the clothes, right? So we basically built something and we just have added a handful of different shirts and stuff like that, stuff that podcasters are into. So we've purposely not made it like a profit thing. Like we try to just keep our costs like our profits really low just so we can kind of get some stuff out there. Cause anything makes you feel part of a community, right? Like the shirt I'm wearing right now is one of them that we have on there. And I like it. Like I like to also support my brand and show that, hey, I'm a podcaster. I'm a proud podcaster. If I go out, people see this, they're like, hey, what's that? I'm like, I'm a podcaster, like I like to share that. And then, so that's just like a fun thing. But podcast SOP is something we built because people were struggling with the production side of podcasting. It, the whole thing is like, find a guest, pick a topic, find a guest, edit, record, or I'm saying it in the wrong order. This is why I have one of these things. Basically, we built like a glorified checklist, if you will, for a podcast host to use. And they get to customize. Every time they have a new episode, they can hit add new episode. It'll populate their list of things they need to do. They can assign team members on there if they want to. They can upload stuff. They can add comments, add due dates, all these things. The idea is, hey, can we take the stress out of it? Because one thing we found is that many podcasters, they keep it on their head. And if there's one thing I've learned to be true, it's that your head is for having ideas, not for storing them. And when you're getting in the moment of like getting ready to record something, you're like, oh, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? Or afterwards, okay, I need to edit. What else do I need to do? Like those things cause stress. So the idea is, can we alleviate some of the stress? So once again, people can stay in podcasting by not having to keep it on their mind all the time. And that's what Podcast SOP was built for. The SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures, as you, a military person, definitely understand very well, probably too well. And the last thing you mentioned is Podcast Lottery, which we actually did an alpha test of. And now that is currently inactive because we're getting it to beta. So we basically like got feedback from about 150 some odd people. And now we're moving into like, we want to actually build an app for this. And the idea is, can we help podcast hosts get more reviews that are integrity based? So someone listens to an episode, then leaves a review. And that's the idea behind it. Because again, podcasting being a lonely space, seeing an Apple review is a really nice feeling. Like anytime I get a review on Apple, I'm like, this is sweet. Like I love this, right? Someone listened to my podcast and left me a review. So we just want to make a way for that to happen. And hopefully in the next few months, that will be out. I've not had the chance to talk about it anywhere. So thank you for asking me about that. But I'm really excited about that because I think it'll really just help, once again, help people that are these creators feel better about what they're doing and feel like they're making a real impact.
Indeed. And so I just want to throw out there too. So we talked pretty much about this from the hosting side. People out there with your books, with your music, with different ideas you want to share, and maybe you don't have the personality or the style that tends towards interrogating people for a significant length of time, where you can go on people's shows and things like that in order to promote what you are doing, which is something that PodMatch is also good for. They call it a podcast tour. So, like when you write your book, you can go on all these shows and things like that. And, it's a good way to get your name out there without having to pay a whole lot. You actually don't have to pay anything at all. If you,
Yeah, you don't. There's two benefits to it. One, people are talking about your book, right, or course or company, whatever it is that you're launching. But two, the backlinks from an SEO perspective. Because think about it, if you mention me in your show notes, those show notes are getting mentioned from Spotify, from Apple, from Google, from YouTube, from like all these big top 50 websites, like the biggest websites on the planet are linking to you. At the end of the day, that's not going to hurt your reputation online. That's actually going to help really elevate the fact that, Google and Bing and all these other websites that, they think Alex Sanfilippo is somebody because he's been on podcasts, because they're all linking to him. So there's a few different benefits to it, and it's a long game. But I always tell people, hey, if you've got something coming out that's newsworthy, get on a tour. Like, be the guest, get on a tour, share what you've learned, and share just transparently. And people really respond well to that.
Okay. Any last words you have for the world? You can say whatever you want.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't worried about what I can and can't say here. You know that. The last thing I'll say is this, that what we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others echoes into eternity. And I believe that if you're any form of creator on either side of the mic, or whether you're never going to do anything with podcasting, whatever you're doing to get out there and serve other people is ultimately what gets remembered, not necessarily what you did for yourself, what you made for yourself. So I encourage everybody listening, get out there and whatever it is that you're doing, find a way to leverage it to serve others. And I just find that you'll live a more happy, fulfilled life and ultimately leave a legacy that others will be inspired to follow. And Devana, I just really am so appreciative of you sharing your platform with me. Like I know that your 50th episode is huge. Like I cannot wait to share this, talk about it. Like this was an honor to be here today. And we covered some topics I've just like not gotten to talk about all this before. So I'm just so appreciative of you and just the platform that you've shared with me today.
May God bless you. May many blessings be upon you. May you see successes that extend far beyond all you've ever reached for. Now, his website is podpros.com. All this information will be in the showy notes. As always, thank you, my lovely listeners. May God's blessings be upon you too, and may you see successes that you've never set your sights on before. In Jesus' name, peace out. Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Feel free to reach out to me directly at Devanin at sexdrugsandjesus.com and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Devanin. It's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.